If there's one thing that has become clear this season with Arsenal, it's that they're missing something. And the first thing everybody wants to point out is that it's a striker, and that's the obvious one, and there is some truth to that. But it's more than that. Arsenal is missing more than just a striker. They're missing a mentality to win. We're going to talk about why that is next, here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub. I like Mikel Arteta. I want to put that out right from the start. I think he is generally and overall a very good manager, and I think if Arsenal were to part ways with him, they could and very well might do a lot worse. So this is not an Arteta out kind of rant. That's not what I want to talk about. But I do think that Mikel Arteta does get in his own way sometimes when it comes to how he approaches running Arsenal's club, and his mentality and his meticulous nature and his need to break down every detail, I think is holding them back. And that's coming from somebody who loves the minutia and loves the details and analytics and finding that little margin here to get better in. And that's what Mikel Arteta is really, really good at. And that's part of why he has had so much success at Arsenal, getting them from the middle of the table when he took over to constantly competing for Premier League titles and in a Champions League semi-final. But it's now holding him back. It's now holding the club back, and it is the missing piece that needs to adjust. We're going to talk about why that is in just a second, but before we do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel. Get down in the comments section. What do you think about Arteta, about this mentality, about what you saw against PSG? Get in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. You can also leave some comments on Twitter and Blue Sky at Pitchside Pub, and check out the website, pitchsidepub.com. So coming off the first leg of the Champions League semifinal against PSG, listen, a 1-0 loss when you're missing some players, in a vacuum, that's not that bad, right? And that's sort of, I think, is the takeaway from a lot of Arsenal fans. PSG's a really good team. So to be down 1-0 against them, in and of itself, is not the end of the world. They're missing Kai Havertz up top. They're missing Gabriel. They're playing without a few guys. Thomas Partey did not play. So they were not at full strength. PSG was. So when you look at it like that, being down 1-0 is really not the end of the world. In fact, you could even say that's sort of a victory in and of itself, and that Arsenal would have been, not happy with that, but they would accept that result, knowing that they'll be in better shape a week from now to try and go out and win the second leg and win the overall match. But that is the problem. That is the problem, is that Mikel Arteta, in my opinion, gets too deep into the minutia of the strategy and of thinking those sorts of things out rather than just going for the jugular and going and getting that win. And that was really evident in this game against PSG. PSG came out and dominated that match for the first 20-25 minutes. Jurrien Timber could have had about 4 yellow cards in the first 20 minutes, including one that easily could have been a PK. I'm not going to get into those debates, but PSG outplayed them very well in the first 20-25 minutes. Then it became a more even match. But down the stretch, in the second half of that game, there was no urgency from Arsenal. There was no attempt to go out and get that goal back, so that when you have to go on the road, mind you, go to Paris for the second leg of this game, you're starting with an even slate. They now go to Paris down 1-0. And yes, you had a little bit of the lesser squad right now because of the injuries, and you're hoping to be back at full strength, when you go play the second leg of this match. And that's the thought process of, well, hey, let's not lose this, right? If we go to get this game-tying goal and try to go to Paris even, we got a chance to be down 2-0, and then we're really in trouble. And I can't say that that's wrong. I understand that thinking. I usually understand the thinking Mikel Arteta has with his strategy, but I think it can be overthinking. And at some point, if you want to win, when it comes down to the nitty-gritty in a knockout stage, or at the end of a long season, at the end of a long domestic season, when, yes, you're trying to compete to get to the top of a table, but now we're down to just a couple games, and it starts to feel like a knockout phase, and some of these games become must-win games, he doesn't flip that switch. It's always the larger picture. It's always the larger strategy. And at some point, you've just got to go, screw it, we're going to go out and win this game. Or screw it, we're going to go get a goal. In this case, it wouldn't have won the game, but they could have at least tried a little more to get a goal to tie it up, a second goal of the game overall, and go to Paris at 1-1 instead of down a goal. And yes, they could have made it worse, and that could have happened, but at some point, if you don't risk it, you are not going to win, and that is part of the problem. Eric Winalda, who's a former U.S. men's national team member and played in a lot of clubs and is a pundit now here in the States, who is not my favorite, but he had a really good point on this, on the way Arsenal approached this yesterday. When all is said, if you look back at the urgency in the last 10 to 15 minutes of that game and you really ask the question, were they okay with a 1-0 loss? Yes, they were okay with a 1-0 loss. They were taking stock of the entirety of the situation and saying, you know what, we're okay with this, and that's every reason why they will never win anything. Everything you need to know about Arsenal you learned in the last 10 minutes of this game. Spineless, absolutely to the core. And you know what? I don't think he's wrong. As usual, Winalda is sort of a jerk about it and is very abrasive, but he's not completely wrong. I don't know that it's completely spineless to the core, but I do think that this mentality stands in their way of not trying to go for it and not trying to win. It's more of a, well, we don't want to lose mentality rather than a we're trying to win mentality. And Winalda's not the only pundit taking this stance. After the game on CBS, on Paramount Plus, Kasper Schmeichel said, I think they need to go for it. They were a little bit too conservative. He was being nicer about it. Craig Burley was a little bit harsher on ESPN. He said the title challenge to Liverpool is embarrassing. It's time for these big players to turn up. It's a big test of their mentality. If they go there and they crumble, it's really not a good look on Mikel Arteta. And this isn't the first time. I went on this same sort of argument last year when Arsenal and Manchester City played down the stretch, and Arsenal did not necessarily need a win in that game, but by basically playing for a draw, which they absolutely did. They came out, they rolled the ball out, they sat back deep, they relied on their admittedly wonderful defenders, and they just said, we are not going to make any attempt to score in this game so long as we don't give up a goal to you. And that's exactly what happened. It ended up being a lifeless draw in what should have been the match of the season. And yes, it didn't cost them their season because a loss would have really hurt them, but it did mean that somebody else was going to have to beat Manchester City in order for Arsenal to win. It put the onus on other clubs to do their dirty work, and I hated that at the time. I hated it for Arsenal fans, and I hated it for Mikel Arteta. I understand the strategy of it. Their thought was, hey, we're going to Manchester. This is an away game against a great informed team. 1 point here is not a loss. 1 point here is not bad. It's better than nothing. If we try to win, we may lose, we may get nothing. Our best bet, the odds are that if we can just get 1 point, somebody else will knock them off. When they have to go on the road somewhere against a better opponent, somebody else will cost them the points that we need them to lose in order to win, so long as we get 1 point here and stay in it. I understand it, but it's weak. It is a weak mentality, and it's not necessarily weak over the course of a full domestic season. I understand that. You got to get your points where you can get them. 3 points isn't always available in some matches. But when push comes to shove, when you get down the stretch at the end of a season and you're neck and neck with good teams in the table, at some point you've got to go out and do the dirty work yourself. At some point you've got to go win a game. And that's what happened here against PSG. They went into it. It looked like they had no intention of possessing the ball. It looked like they had no intention of trying to score. PSG dominated that game, particularly at the start. And it looked like Arsenal was perfectly okay with that and just saying, hey, we're going to have 30-35% possession here. We're going to lock in on defense. We do have strong defenders. That's a strength of ours. We're missing our midfielder who tends to advance forward. We're missing our striker, what little we have of a striker anyway. And so what's the point of trying to win this? If we can just keep it 0-0, that's a win, and we'll go try to win it in the second leg when we are a little healthier. And then, of course, they gave up the early goal, and that plan sort of, went to crap right off the bat, but they still stuck with it. And at no point really did Arsenal try to win that game. And this is the leg that's at home. You gotta try and at least draw this game. Even if you go down early, you gotta try and come back. Now you're asking your team to go to Paris and try to win by 2. It's setting them up to fail. I understand the mentality. I can always follow the logic behind Mikel Arteta's justifications. It's not like it's illogical. It's not like it's flat out wrong. But it's weak. It's weak, it's passive, and it's over-calculated. And that's a thing Mikel Arteta does. He is known for being absolutely meticulous and wanting to work on every tiny little minutia and every detail to win at the margins and to get that tiny little advantage. Even the pickpocket thing, right? Bringing in the preseason, he brought in a pickpocket to I guess pick the pocket of his players and steal their wallets or whatever to try and teach them about awareness and always being aware. And the media has had a field day with that because it's so just utterly ludicrous and ridiculous. But that's the sort of thing he does, is he wants to if there is that much of a margin, if there is one little micron of progress that he can make that other teams aren't making, he wants to do it. And generally I respect that. But it does get in the way. When push comes to shove, this is now the second year in a row where they are playing in a big game for their season, and rather than try to win, they tried not to lose. And that is becoming Mikel Arteta's MO, and I do wonder if that is going to overstay its welcome at Arsenal and how much longer they're going to put up with this. Again, I'm not Arteta out. I think he's a good manager. I think if you replaced him, you'd probably end up with somebody worse. But he has to make that adjustment if he wants to take Arsenal to the next level. Because right now, they go out in these big games and they try not to lose instead of trying to win. Yes, Arsenal needs a striker. Kai Havertz is not the striker they need, and he wasn't even in this game. And so when he's out, they really don't have a lot of goal-scoring threat there up the middle. Bukayo Saka is there, and he has to do more. But when he doesn't score, they don't score. That's sort of how it has been going, and they really do need a striker presence there, but that's not it. A dominant striker presence who's not being fed the ball aggressively because the team's happy to sit back and have 35% possession is not going to solve the problem. The problem, as much as the striker is part of it, is also the mentality and the preparation and the mindset that Arteta wants his team to play with in these big games. He's going to have to change that, obviously, when they go to Paris. They're going to have to try and win that game. There is no draw here, so I do expect that to change. But I do wonder if they could have put themselves in a better position to win the overall match by trying to get that equalizing goal while they're at home. And yes, they could have given up a goal and really screwed themselves, but you're not going to win without trying, and that seems to be what Arsenal's trying to do. I would love to get your thoughts. Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. You can also leave some comments on Twitter and Blue Sky at Pitchside Pub. While you're at it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel, and check out the website, pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub.